She said she'd never go out with me again, so I had to persuade her. Let me take you back 37 years, July 1986. First job out of college, first day on the job. And I'm sitting in the HR conference room for the Travelers Insurance Companies, and in walks Jane Bailey. And I looked at her and I thought, wow, she's beautiful. She told me sometime later when she first saw me, her thought was, what an egghead. Travelers really got a winner here. So I stumbled out of the gate badly, but I recovered quickly. And within a matter of a few weeks, I was no longer going out with my longtime girlfriend. Jane and I started dating. We fell in love, and it was awesome. Until later that fall, when my old girlfriend called. And it really took me back. And suddenly, I didn't know who I wanted to be with. And I could not make up my mind for months. And when I say months, I'm talking November, December, January, February, March, April. How many of you would put up with somebody who couldn't decide between you and another person for 6 months? Well, Jane and I still work together, and it was late April. I saw her in the break room. I asked how she was doing, and that's when she said, never again. And who could blame her? But here was my dilemma. I'd settled things in my heart. I knew she's the one I wanted to be with, and I was thinking I wanted to marry her. Now, if you would have known me back then, you would have said, do not do this. Don't get into a commitment you might not be able to keep. And if you'd known her, you would have said, run for the hills. So I knew I was going to need to do something big. And here's what I did. On her birthday, May 14th, 1987, I sent her a dozen roses at work. She appreciated that. She liked the attention. I'd asked if I could take her to dinner, and she agreed. So I showed up at her apartment with another dozen roses and a bottle of wine. Now she's thinking, hey, this is a pretty good birthday. We get ready to leave. We go downstairs, and waiting for us in the parking lot was a silver cloud Rolls Royce and chauffeur. He drove us to downtown Columbus, to one of the tallest buildings in the city at the time, and we took this glass elevator up more than 30 stories and had a romantic dinner overlooking the skyline of the city. And in the back of the Rolls, on the ride home, I popped the question, and she said yes. It's a pretty important word, yes. In fact, I would say it's critical for your professional success and incredibly important for your personal happiness that you understand how to ethically get more people to say yes more often. What I'd like to do is share with you some psychology that can help make that a reality. It's called Presuasion. Now, I know that's probably a new term for many of you, so let me define it. According to Dr. Robert Cialdini, the most cited living social psychologist on the planet when it comes to ethical influence, according to Cialdini, persuasion is arranging for an audience to be receptive to your message before they ever hear it. I like to call it setting the stage. Think about my proposal to Jane. I could have asked her that day in the break room, and I'm certain she would have said no. But when I set the stage romantically, it made it much, much easier for her to say yes. Now, as I look out, and I know there are many students from New Albany High School, some of you might have engaged this psychology unknowingly. Maybe you did a big reveal to ask somebody to a dance or a prom. You were setting the stage to make it easier for that person to say yes to you. What I'd like to do is share with you 3 brain rules around persuasion to help make it easier for people to say yes to you so you can enjoy more success at the office and more happiness at home. We're going to talk about attention, mindset, and triggers. So we start with attention. And you see a quote on the screen from a man named Daniel Kahneman. Kahneman is a Nobel Prize winner, and he is one of the foremost experts in the world on how our minds work. And somebody asked him a question one time. They said, what is the best advice you can give to help understand the world better? And his response was, nothing is as important as you think it is while you're thinking about it. So let's explore why that is the case. The first thing to note about attention is it's very limited. According to research, the average person can only hold 4 to 6 thoughts in their mind at any one time. And that limited attention is very easily diverted, right? All we need to do is consider our phones. The moment your phone rings, dings, or bings, it's almost impossible not to look to see who called, texted, or emailed. Second thing to note about attention is we can only consciously focus on one thing at a time. Sorry to burst bubbles, but multitasking is a myth. So what happens when we take this limited attention and we focus it on something? That is where we give the object of our attention more importance than perhaps it deserves. We literally have blinders on and cannot see the forest for the trees. And here's an example from research. In the year 2011, in the weeks leading up to the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 tragedy, Americans were asked this question: what are two of the most significant events of the last 70 years? As you might imagine, a good number, 30%, said 9/11 was one of the two most significant events. But let's think for a moment what it competes against. Bombing of Pearl Harbor, dropping of the atomic bomb, Korean War, Vietnam War, assassination of President Kennedy, assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. Folks, there's half a dozen events, and we're not even up to 1970. Now, interestingly, as they continue to ask the very same question in the days leading up to the 10th anniversary of 9/11, the number spiked to 65%. Did 9/11 suddenly become twice as important in American history, or was something else happening? Something else was happening. You see, in the days leading up to the 10th anniversary, people were inundated with media coverage, and rightly so. But the blinders came on, and they gave it more importance than perhaps it deserved in the course of history. They could not see the forest for the trees. And I say that because in the weeks after, as they continued to ask the same question, the number fell back down to 30%. Nothing is as important as you think it is while you're thinking about it. If you can grab somebody's limited attention and focus it on something, you've won half the battle when it comes to persuasion. So let's move to our next, there we go. Let's move to our next brain rule, mindsets. Who you are in the moment you make a decision is where you are when you make that decision. Okay, what do I mean where you are? Well, where you are emotionally, where you are physically, where you are mentally, those all impact your willingness to say yes. So let's start with emotions. During my career, I ran a corporate university. We had a young lady who joined our team, deathly afraid of public speaking. But what impressed me was that she was tackling her fear. And she was leading hour-long sections of workshops for us, and she was doing really well. But she told me one day in one of our coaching sessions, she said, I still get so nervous before I get ready to speak. So I asked her to describe, what do you mean by nervous? What are your thoughts and what are your feelings? And as she described those, I said, you know what? I have many of the same thoughts and I feel many of the same feelings as I get ready to speak, but I consider that excitement. If we can reframe how you think about those thoughts and feelings from nerves to excitement, I think it'll make a big difference for you. So we began to work on that in our coaching. And sometime later she came to me and she said, it really works. I don't get nervous anymore. I really get excited before I speak. And by the time she left our company, she was leading 8-hour workshops on her own. She never would have been willing to take on that responsibility if she had been stuck in nerves as opposed to excitement. But changing her emotionally made it easier for her to say yes. Where you are physically impacts your willingness to say yes. So here I like to say work, worship, and workout. You're the same human being in all three places, but you can be a very different person in each of those places. So don't you think somebody could ask you the very same question and get very different answers depending on where you are? Absolutely. And finally, where we find ourselves mentally impacts our willingness to say yes. And for this, I'll just share some research. So imagine for a moment you are walking into a grocery store and somebody like me greets you. And I say, hi, I work for a marketing firm. We represent ABC Company, and they've come out with a new type of pop. And we're asking customers, if you're willing to give us your email address, we'll send you an email with coupons for free samples. Would you be willing to share your email? And in that scenario, 33% of people said sure. At a later time, 76%. So 2.5 times more said yes to the exact same question. Why such a big difference? Because in the second scenario, they used a persuasive opener to change where people were mentally just before they made their ask. In the second scenario, if you had walked in, I would have asked you, "Excuse me, do you consider yourself to be adventurous, the kind of person who likes to try new things?" Well, we've all been adventurous a time or two in life, right? And we all try new things all the time. So as you might imagine, nearly everybody said yes to that. And once they did, they saw themselves as people who like to try new things. It was only consistent at that point to give their email so they could try the new type of pop. Who you are in the moment you make a decision is where you are when you make that decision. If you can touch where people are emotionally, physically, or mentally, it can make it much, much easier for them to say yes when you finally make your ask. Our third and final brain rule, triggers. Sights, sounds, and surroundings, they all impact how we think and how we feel and how we behave. So let's start with sights, and we'll do something simple, colors. The color red for most people signals stop. It's a color associated with fear and aggression. Green, on the other hand, is a go color. When the traffic light turns green, we're free to go. Green is the color of money. Usually more money means more opportunities. Green is the color of the environment. Open spaces, open places. Now imagine for a moment your organization has come out with a new product or service, and you're advertising it on your homepage, and you want people to press a button. Don't make it red. That's only sending stop, fear, and aggression signals. You want that button to be some shade of green to signal go, freedom, and prosperity await. Because sights impact how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. And so do sounds. Interesting little study was done in a wine shop. They wanted to see if something as simple as music could impact people's purchasing decisions. So here's what they did. Upon entering the store, customers would either hear French or German music playing softly in the background. The question is, how would that impact their purchasing decisions? Well, lo and behold, when they played French music, they sold 333% more French wine as compared to German. But when they played German music, they sold 275% more German wine as compared to French. Because sounds impact how we think, feel, and behave. And finally, so do the surroundings that we find ourselves in randomly. Now, if I asked a stranger on the street, do you think it would make a difference if someone asked you a question and you were standing in front of a bakery, a shoe shop, or a flower shop? I'm pretty certain most people would say, not at all. They'd probably say, I wouldn't even notice where I'm standing. Or maybe they'd say, I make decisions based on the merits of what's being asked. Okay, maybe. But what does research show? Interesting study was done where a nice-looking young man was given a task. Go up to random women, strike up a conversation with one goal in mind. Can you get these complete strangers to give you their phone number? He either made his ask in front of a bakery, a shoe shop, or a flower shop. And the question is, would he be more successful in front of one of these places versus the others? Well, there was a clear winner. Twice as often, he was able to get the phone number when he made his ask in front of the flower shop as opposed to the bakery or the shoe shop. Why such a big difference? Subconsciously, flowers prompt thoughts of romance. And women in a romantic state of mind were more willing to give their phone number to a complete stranger, maybe on the hopes of romance. But it was clear. These triggers, sights, sounds, and surroundings, if you can tap into them, it can make it easier for someone to ultimately say yes to you. And there's that word again, yes. I said earlier, it's critical for your professional success. It's really important for your personal happiness. And now you have a new tool, Presuasion, to use ethically to make that happen. It's my sincere hope that you will enjoy more professional success, that you will have more personal happiness, and that maybe, just maybe, it will help you spend the rest of your life with the person of your dreams.